They must not know where I live. Welcome back, everyone, to another riveting episode of Return of the Mac. So, the so-called mother of all breaches recently made headlines, actually, in some dramatic clickbait, but honestly, it's Forbes, so I do lean in a little bit more depending on the publisher of some of these articles. But they're talking about the mother of all breaches, or Moab, being the sheer number of records leaked, 26 billion with a B. And while it's not necessarily earth-shattering news to discuss this in the cryptic ecosystem, it does bring light to a topic that I'm really excited we're going to focus on today, and maybe more episodes in the future around this topic as well. But we're going to demystify some of these things, and we're going to start talking about the dark web. That's right, we are shedding light on a dark topic. see what I did there? That was really good. So basically, if whether you're new to the show, a noob in general, a normie, or an expert, we're going to start from the basics, and we're going to talk about the dark web, what it is, who's in there, what's hanging out. We're going to talk a little bit, start with our hot topic around this, specifically this 26 billion record leak, or the Moab is what we're calling it. And then I also want to kind of explore a little bit about, we're talking about these things to understand them, but also from a defender's point of view. How does this work with a threat intelligence program? So without much ado, going to introduce my guest today, Nick Hyatt. So Nick is not only a good friend of mine because it is a small cyber world, but also he is Blackpoint's threat intelligence director. So we're really excited to have him here today and to be talking about this. And Nick, we met when you were, we met in the trenches of incident response and Optiv, but you also were a practice manager for Optiv's Global Threat Intelligence Center. And of course, between that, it sounds like you have enough, viewpoints in the world between IR and threat intelligence that I'm really excited to dig into a little bit more. So
Yeah,
welcome.
thanks for having me on. So, if there's one thing I have, it is opinions for sure. But yes, it's very good to be here. I'm so proud of you. We met when you were the little antelope, and now you're the lioness. So
Oh,
love it.
thanks.
Yeah.
Getting
Well,
there.
all right, all right. But yeah, super happy to be here. This was one of the cool things that I saw you doing. I was like, I need to be there. So here I am.
I really do think we're just going to touch the top of the iceberg, but I really think this topic, we may have to dig in even more so back today. But we're going to start from scratch because I do think that a lot of people have this concept around the dark web. It sounds like a very scary place, but I think what you and I will talk about a little bit is demystifying it in a way so it's not as scary, and it kind of feels like it's a little bit more of part of our economy and normal social structure in the world, and society operates now with the dark web behind it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because we hear about the dark web all the time. Oh, there's all kinds of spooky stuff on the dark web. But when you look at what the dark web is literally just the part of the internet that is not indexed by a search engine, right? So you have Google search, you have Bing, you have all these search engines, DuckDuckGo, if you want to use one that doesn't track what you're searching for. But it's just an area of the internet that isn't indexed by these things. And so, yeah, there's some bad stuff on there, but it's not all bad. It's just stuff that isn't
Right.
indexed. Yeah.
And, that was the other thing I was going to preface too in the introduction of this. And I didn't do it, but really it's also understanding the use of the dark web for anonymous communication. So people who are communicating maybe with journalists, people who are trying to get more information to protect themselves. Maybe they live within an area that is trying to under an authoritative regime or a government. And so I have heard of stories where the dark web has enabled people around the world to also protect themselves.
Yeah,
Which sounds
exactly.
weird.
Exactly. One of the key factors in the dark web that comes into play both from a criminal aspect and from, just a survivability aspect is its anonymity. So to get on the dark web, you need a specific tool. You need the Tor browser. But
Mhm.
once you're on there, it functions just like any other part of the internet, right? It's just that door opens the gateway to it, and then it's a fully anonymous environment. So it helps and facilitates both threat actors and folks that, freedom fighters, folks that don't want to have any sort of attributable information to them, things like that. So yeah, there's all kinds of uses for it.
Cool, and bad stuff, right? They're also
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
there's
that's,
all kinds of bad stuff, and that's what we're here to talk about, right? That's
That
what
is.
we find interesting, is
It
all the bad
is.
stuff.
This is why I watch, like, crime documentaries too. I just
Eh,
wanna know, like, I really wanna know what's going on in the background. Well,
right,
that does bring
exactly,
us
yeah.
to the hot topic too, which is this Moab. It's this 26 billion records leaked data set of Dropbox, LinkedIn, Twitter, Adobe. I mean, you name it. Someone was clearly more productive than I have ever been in my entire life and took the time to aggregate all of this data. So in this, kind of in the title here of understanding that security researchers have brought this to light, about this database of no less than 26 billion. Granted, there was a lot of overlapping data from what I've read, a significant amount. That was discovered. So, in this data leak, or what they're referring to as Moab, mother of all breaches, they have found that, it just feels like clickbait, but I know it's not. It does make sense. But they found in this case a threat actor or data broker. I don't even like saying the word data broker. I feel like they're data dealers. A broker sounds like it is above my net worth of someone I could hire if being a data broker. But essentially, they compiled 12 terabytes of data, 26 billion records into a single open storage instance. And all of this data was pulled from, well, you guessed it, cyber attacks, leaked breaches, phishing schemes, and of course, also an assortment of US and government based data was intertwined with it. And really, this comes back to the whole that, yes, from an identity attack standard, password sprays, credential stuffing, these things are still a thing, folks. They're not going anywhere. And productive bad guys like this managed to put it all together. So, Nick, thoughts? Why is this relevant? I do feel like we're really desensitized as people right now to things like data breaches or leaked records, but why
Yeah,
why is this relevant? Why does it matter?
yeah. So you bring up a good point that we are desensitized to this sort of thing, right? Because not a day that goes by that we don't have another vulnerability or another data leak or somebody else got breached and our data's out there, right?
Right.
So I think we need to preface this by saying, e- when you are thinking about credential leaks and stuff like that, it's not just, oh, you're on social media, your data got leaked, stuff like that. It's if you have a presence on the internet in any capacity, your data has been leaked. And when we talk about credentials, we don't just mean usernames and passwords. We
Mhm.
also talk about identifying information like browser data, things that you have stored in your browser, passwords, sometimes credit card numbers, things like that. But what all of this is a what I like to call the mother of all database joins, right? So a lot of the data in here, tracking back to the 2013 LinkedIn breach is what's in here, right? So this is sometimes 10, 15-year-old data that's
Oh,
that's in this.
nice.
But what it is now is that it's all in a singular place, right? And so 12
Okay.
terabytes of data is a lot of data, and it's all of these amalgamated breaches just clustered into one. Now there's very likely some new data in there. But for the most part, this is just yet again, as we often see with these headlines, is that, oh, it's another massive data breach. Well, really what it is it's a bunch of old data that's been
Right.
meshed together and pushed out into the public.
So it just feels like a really dramatic headline. Like, it just
It
feels
is.
like it's a lot and it doesn't actually matter.
Well,
Even though, but to get a name like Moab, it does sound like it
right.
has to be somewhat
I,
important.
yeah, exactly. And from a scale aspect, like it's 26 billion with a B, right? It's
It's a
like,
lot.
do you think there's some threat actor just going through line by line through a 26 billion like line Excel spreadsheet? just of all
Right.
of this. And no, number one, Excel would crash, but it's it's still just a staggering amount of data. I mean, 12 terabytes of data, right? Where are you going to put that? You've got to deal with storage and all this other stuff. But the thing to really take away from this is that these credentials and things like that are really the originating point of a lot of cyber attacks, right? So if we look at what's
Mhm.
going on in the news today, not only is this a headline, but just last week, Microsoft themselves were victim to a credential stuffing attack, and it was on
Oof.
a legacy account that had a weak password allegedly, and didn't have MFA on it. They admitted it themselves. And so one of the things you have to remember, and we're a little bit desensitized to this too, because we're in this industry. Security is hard, right?
Mhm.
So one of the biggest companies in the world with one of the biggest investments in security and things like that still got popped by a credential stuffing attack. So when you think about it from that aspect, it's like, yeah, our data's out there, yeah, we're desensitized to it, but there are steps that you can take to protect yourself at a basic
Right.
level to increase that barrier of entry, because these attacks are real and they'll use this data for that. Even if it's just not, hey, they're going to come after you know uh Joe Smith that lives in Eureka, Iowa, that,
Mhm.
oh, hey, what does he have that a threat actor cares about? Well, not really anything, but he has the capability to use the same password in multiple places that could
Right.
then lead to
No
a
one does that.
cascading effect,
That's
right?
crazy.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
everybody uses password one, and it's the most secure password ever. Just use it everywhere.
To
It's
this
fine
day.
to this day. Yeah.
Man, I just feel like you talk about some things, and it all leads back to identity. Like everything is going to come
Hmm.
back to talking about password cracking, stealing of credentials, and that's. I mean, I just want something new, something fresh and different, but I don't feel like we're at that point. Like, what is the intent of a person, likely a data broker or a bad guy, an adversary, putting together this data? Doesn't it kind of benefit us though, if you think about it? If you have dark web scanning technologies and you want to absorb and cross reference some of the data for that overlapping data, doesn't it kind of benefit them a little bit? Because now, from a technology stance, we have even more visibility of what's already out there, what
Yeah.
users and
So
systems are at risk.
really the net benefit to a data access broker or a threat actor is really, if you look in the ecosystem that these guys operate in, you really
Mhm.
have um, you have data brokers, which are like, hey, I've got this big breach, all of this data access to site A, right? And
Yeah.
we exfiltrated this data. We're going to sell this data just out on the dark web, and sometimes even in the clear web, right? So if you look at something like Breach Forums is a clear web website that deals in data dumps, right?
Mhm.
But clear web, deep web, dark web, any of these areas. So yeah, the three
All the
webs, right?
webs.
The iceberg. You made the iceberg,
Yeah.
comparison. But so they're selling this data, and threat actors will buy this data to then facilitate their initial attack. So that's the
Right.
net benefit. And when you have all of this amalgamated into one giant area, you can be like, hey, we're going to do some rapid testing across all of this data to see what works and what doesn't. And then we'll take that and say, hey, this is verified working 10 million email addresses. Pay me $260 US and you can have this. And then if you even have like a 1% ROI on that, so you
Right.
you buy 10 million addresses and 1% of them end up working for a password spray attack, then you can gain initial access to an environment. You can deploy malware. You can deploy ransomware.
Mhm.
You can get a massive cascading ROI on this just by buying that initial access. So that's where the value is for these threat actors, is that the initial access brokers will sell this, the threat actors will buy it, and then turn around and use that for initiating their campaigns.
Yeah, we were talking about that. One of the case studies actually is what you're saying on the return on investment. It sounds like we're going to become a finance podcast here talking about this particular topic, but we were talking about, like, okay, so you could probably get, if you're lucky, domain admin level type of credentials. You could purchase
Mhm.
them, or if it was extremely targeted, maybe you spent a couple $100. But if you turned around, got access to the environment, played it low and slow, not a lot of noise, drop some sort of level of persistence, and then resell that access or
Right.
resell general information about the environment. You could sell that access for probably more than the credentials,
Yep.
right? If you
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see these advertised all the time, right? Is that like I've got access to major US financial institution,
Mhm.
$500, you know. And so the idea of, yeah, so the brokers resell that the list of data, then the access brokers will resell access to an environment, and then a threat actor will get in there, and let's say you've got a ransomware as a service operation, right?
Right.
So they'll sell the license to use their ransomware, and then this threat actor will get in there, deploy the ransomware. The original developer gets a cut, this guy gets a cut. So you see how
It's a
you
full
made a joke.
ecosystem,
Yeah,
full
you made the joke
syndicate
about we're
here.
a financial podcast, but it's a business, and that's the
It's
thing.
for
Is
your
like
compounding interest,
right,
right?
exactly. You're compounding interest on Granny Smith's login to Hotmail, right?
Yeah,
Because she
yeah.
used the password "I love my grandson" everywhere. But you see how this is not really the domain of just some kid in his parents' basement, right?
Right,
This is major international crime syndicates, right? So, and I I'm not trying to be alarmist and things like that. It's just the reality of the world that we live in, right? Is that
right.
these are criminal enterprises. It's a business. They have HR departments, they have negotiating departments, and you've got guys like Evil Corp that are out there with wrapped Lamborghinis and stuff like that. But you've got other guys that, hey,
Oh, that's
maybe
like
they're
one of
just,
my that's one of my favorite. Have you seen the picture with
I,
oh, oh, did I mute myself? Can you hear
no,
me?
you're good. You're good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
did you see the picture with it was I don't think it wasn't Evil Corp, it was another group, and he was pulled over by a police officer, and this was in Russia, outside his Lamborghini, and he's just casually talking to him and then gets like
Yeah, exactly.
on his way.
Exactly. It's
Just super
and
casual.
and so
Wrapped Lamborghini.
maybe you have some guy that is just pissed off at his boss, right? It's like, hey,
Right.
my boss isn't paying me very much money. I don't like it here. This place sucks. You know, let me see what's on. Who's asking for access, or maybe they get hit up by a threat actor. Like, hey, we'll give you ten thousand
Oh,
dollars if you
here's
give
those
us access.
insider threat
Insider
programs that no
threats,
one
right?
ever built
Yeah,
up.
exactly. So you see how you start building this spider web of your basic stolen credentials lead to, maybe it's an insider threat, maybe it's a access
Right.
broker, all of this other stuff. So while, yes, the headline of "it's 26 billion with a B records and they've all been stolen, could you be next?" is definitely like, yeah, if it bleeds it leads. But the core concept of your data is out there and there are things you can do to protect yourself is the message to take away, whether it's a target breach or, and by the way, all of these companies don't send your goons to assassinate me. Like, I'm just saying,
No one's
whether
gonna
it's a,
do that.
I don't
I mean,
know, I don't, maybe,
I was like, okay, so I was trying to look up the history around the dark web and really how it started. And is it true that it was back in the 70s? You have ARPANET, but it was utilized by Stanford students to sell weed to MIT students. Is that
well,
really? Yeah.
eh, eh, there's a little bit of element of truth to every legend, right? Urban legends don't become urban legends for no reason. And with the proliferation of like weed stores just down the block, right? You don't need to use the dark
Right.
web to sell weed anymore. But you've got stuff like the Silk Road, right? And this goes into
Right.
some of the things that you were talking about with, like, hey, there's bad stuff on the dark web. There absolutely is, right? I've done a lot of work in this space around IR and consulting and things like that. As we worked together back in the dark ages, right? Which was like, what, 6 years ago. But either way, but there's always this question of, hey, we want to know what's out on the dark web, what's out there about us, right? And really, unless you're involved in three things, which is, narcotics, weapons, or abuse material, which we won't get into because that's a whole other thing. Um, what's on the dark web is usually just data, like what's in this dump. Is that, if unless you're actually going out and seeking bad things, much like with any crime, If you're
Right.
going out and seeking bad things, yeah, you'll get involved. And if you look at stuff like the Silk Road, facilitated by the rise of cryptocurrency and that sort of thing, it's all narcotics, selling narcotics, things like that. So there
Mhm.
wasn't a heavy information trade on the dark road. It was all narcotics, assassinations, guns, all this other stuff.
But fast forward to 2010, and that's
Fast
where we're
forward to 2010,
seeing
right?
cryptocurrency post Silk Road now being utilized though for ransomware attacks too.
A
What
hundred
we're seeing
percent, 100%.
on the cyber side. It almost
There's
makes cybersecurity less sexy, to be honest, is when you start talking about the dark web, because you could really accomplish a lot on a target as an adversary just by leveraging what's being sold on these forums.
100%. And here's the thing to remember is that one of the recurring themes in our industry is like, what are the big bad guys doing, right? Like what's Midnight Blizzard doing? What's APT 29 doing? What are all these cool
Right.
buzzworded marketed
I
groups
was gonna say
doing?
good job for using the right word of midnight blizzard.
Right? Yeah, it's
They're
like,
gonna switch it up again, but yeah.
yeah,
No,
exactly.
that's
Sure,
perfect.
for sure. But what are they all doing? And what they're doing is they're not burning 0 days on every
No,
little target, right? What they're doing
no.
is they're getting these credentials. They're probably not buying them. They're probably just be like, "Hey, give me." And they're taking these and then they're just doing a password spray attack. Like what just happened to Microsoft that they themselves admitted. So it's not hearsay, anything like that. It's in their write up. Like, "Hey, we didn't have MFA on this. It had a weak password, got hit by a credential stuffing attack. Boom, and now your CEO's email is getting read."
Right. I feel like the one question I've gotten asked before by just regular people, and this question was asked by a cop too, and he was just curious. He's like, "So, is it illegal for me to get on, the Onion Router? Is it illegal for me
Mhm.
to explore the dark web? Like, where does the liability shift though if you start looking at these forums and you're doing it kind of recklessly, but it's purely from a threat research basis?" And we were talking about this internally when we were doing a little bit of this research too, of like, hey, can we find some? I need to find some web shells. Like, I want to see some good examples, which I've pulled a couple, but where's that liability conversation as defenders if we're coming, or threat intelligence analysts? You're coming in and looking across this, as isn't it gonna
So
come back to you
So
eventually?
I want to preface this by saying I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, right? This is just you and me having a discussion. So no, it's
Asking
not.
for a friend.
Yeah, I'm asking for a friend, right? Hey,
Yeah.
so it's not illegal to get on the dark web at all. Anybody can do it. Just go download Tor. Like we said at the top of the show, right? You can use it
Mm,
to bolster anonymity. I mean, I know some people that the only browsing they do is via Tor, right? So,
yeah.
it's not that they're out there doing bad things, it's that they appreciate the anonymity that the dark web gives them. But there are certain lines that you can cross, right? So
Hmm.
it's not illegal to go join a hacking forum, right? You can have an account on breached forums, but just be aware that there are bad actors associated with these forums. And then if they're
Right.
ever taken down by law enforcement,
Your name will
maybe
pop
your
up,
name is
or
popping up there.
your
And
IP.
you're not doing anything, you just have an account.
Right.
But if you start posting on stuff, that can cascade back to you. So, it's one of those things where what is your personal threshold for risk, right? So, this is not saying go on the dark web and buy guns and drugs and whatever. Don't do that.
No, this
This is
isn't
not a Warren
GTA.
Zevon song. This is not send
Yeah.
lawyers drugs and guns or lawyers guns and money, right? But, it's a certain amount of, let's take the aspect of a gun, right? You treat every gun as if it's loaded. So when you're dealing with the grayer areas of things, treat it like it's a loaded gun, right? Don't point it at
Yeah.
anything you don't want to kill. So it's don't point it at your own foot and shoot yourself in the foot because you thought, hey, I'm on the dark web, I'm anonymous, I can click on this, because that's not how it works, right?
No, you're
What
messing
we
with
find
business.
Exactly. What we find, like with the Silk Road being taken down, is that it's a cascading thing, right? So law enforcement is active on the dark web. They're on these sites, they're
Yeah.
monitoring these sites. So just use a respectable amount of smarts when you're doing things that maybe aren't kosher.
Okay. Okay. So curiosity could, in fact, kill the cat in the terms of going on the dark web and liability, and you're not a lawyer, nor do you want to play one on TV. So we were kind of playing around though around this research of okay, let's look at the marketplace and see what's for sale because I am kind of curious. So we pulled some artifacts, and we'll show some of the screenshots that we were able to pull. But like one of the things we wanted to do is, can I get like a standard cost of supplies for things like a web shell and being able to find just I need a good web shell that gets you initial access. And then we searched a good amount and we actually found a Telegram post, a message selling web shell access. It says I need .edu, gov, or high DA fresh web shell for SEO, assuming DA is domain admin. I don't know how to speak dark web talk here. But it was interesting. So if it's edu.gov, they're going for about 60 to 120 bucks. And then if it was like an organization.com based DA level, goes up to $150 as well. Index fresh, not hacked. Translate this for me. Okay. Like, what is this? Home, dir, I know directory clean uploads has looks like some capabilities to actually get system access, or pull data. I'm guessing based on that.
Right. Yeah.
Is this just that? This
I
is
mean,
just
that's
step
how it's
one.
conducted. Yeah, that's step one, right? So this person wants access to .edu and .gov addresses for SEO, right? So what are they doing here?
Yeah.
So maybe they're a malware author. Maybe they want to get an info stealer out there. And so one of the other things that we've talked about from the APG, from the Blackpoint Adversary Pursuit Group, my team, is that one of the things that these folks do is they will go out and they will basically play the SEO game, search engine optimization, and they
Right.
will look for things that people are searching for, right? So maybe somebody's searching for how to put a table of contents in Word. And so they'll put an ad out on Google at a website, maybe compromised infrastructure at an edu or a .gov, and they'll put up their malware that is called word table of contents.exe, right? And
Right.
so when that person types into Google, how do I put table of contents in Word? Boom, up comes this ad that serves this malicious software. They download it, they run it, all of their
Mm-hmm.
browser data gets stolen, compiled into one of these breaches, and then resold to facilitate further attacks. Right. So it's a very it, again, it's a whole ecosystem, right? And we could spend hours and hours talking about how these ecosystems work, how they started, things like that. But
Right.
yeah,
I mean, the other one we found too was, password dump, data dump, saying that 65 to 75% of these accounts are valid. $500 dash buy. Like I'm speaking dealer. I don't understand any of this. 125 for every 100K and negotiable. So that's nice. They offer
yeah,
some negotiating power. That's really nice.
right, yeah.
But it's
Got to
kind of
be
what you're saying
flexible.
too. They pulled from Yahoo, Gmail, Pornhub, Microsoft, VPN services, bank, and they have terabytes of data for sale in this case.
Yeah, and is all of it good data? Maybe not. But when you have bulk data like that, it's
Hmm.
just a matter of, hey, like I said earlier, I've got 10 million accounts. 1% of them are legit. What's my ROI on this? So, again, it comes back to, if I spend $100 on buying some account or a compilation of accounts, and then 1% of those are legit, but I make 10 grand off of the data that I take from it or the ransomware infections that I distribute, things like that, then massive
Hmm.
ROI. So it just, again, it's a big loop of, yeah, we're operating on Telegram, and be aware, Telegram's not the dark web, right? Telegram's just a messaging app you can get on your phone. So
Right.
these folks just aren't only in the dark web. Like, it's all on Telegram, it's on the clear web, it's on the dark web. So they're among us, right? The actors are among us. But the important thing to remember is that it's not just you, right? They're not targeting Mac. They're not targeting
Hmm.
Nick. Well, I mean, maybe they target us because we're cool, but they're not targeting individuals. They are targeting credentials. So what they want is the same password over and over and over again because, hey, you mentioned somebody had their Gmail or their
Corn Hub.
they're not putting a really detailed password on
Corn
it.
Hub.
I'm
Right.
pretty sure, right? But if they're using
Hope not.
Spring 2023 on their
Corn Hub.
account and it's their work password too, that's
Okay,
what
and then that's
happens.
where, yeah,
Right.
that's where the credential stuffing comes in. Okay,
Exactly.
so let's, I like to always bring it back to, from the defenders, we kind of broken down
Hmm.
like what it is. It is not, it doesn't sound that complicated. It's not that scary, but we do see a lot of product pitching out there around dark web scanning technologies. I
Right.
know we're pushing out our own technology, but we kind of tell us about this process where us as defenders are using these technologies, and the process around white glove notifications, or how we're supporting our customers. What does that actually look like? How can we build out a threat intelligence program that incorporates this OSINT type of process or capability into it?
So I'm going to get up on a soapbox here a little bit when we're talking about threat intelligence and what it can be used for, right?
I love
Because,
that. Strong opinions
yeah, strong opinions, opinions with a capital O. I'm not afraid to
require
share them,
strong
right?
drinks. Yep. Yep.
So, threat intelligence at its core is educational. It's an educational tool, right? It gives you context to the world around you or the environments around you, things like that. So, when we're talking about the dark web and we're talking about white glove notifications and things like that, what are we helping to protect against? We're helping to protect against these low level credential stuffing attacks, which, by the way, something to the tune of 75 to 80% of all malicious attacks start with the person, whether that's social engineering or credential stuffing or phishing or what have you. So threat intelligence, when you approach it from that standpoint, is how do we help the organization or the person protect themselves? And so if we can give that heads up, like, hey, this set of accounts from your environment showed up on a dark web resellers
Hmm.
page, right? So it's all of these accounts with all of these passwords. What's your immediate action? Go change those passwords. Put MFA on those accounts, right? Because that makes the barrier to entry for attackers harder. And what is the one thing that criminals are? Is lazy. So, uh, again, and I don't mean that in a derogative term. I mean that in they are going to
Yeah.
go for the low hanging fruit. Look at Midnight Blizzard, right? They didn't burn a 0 day on Microsoft. They burnt a password spray attack, which is
Back
5
to
minutes in an
basics.
afternoon. It's a basic
Yeah.
thing, right? So if we're saying, listen, these accounts showed up in a dark web credential sale, you need to make sure that these are password protected. They have MFA on all the accounts, not just mission critical stuff. Just put MFA on it, right? It's 2024. Put MFA
Yeah.
on every account that you have. Okay. Get your buy in, whatever. Just do
I
it.
mean, we say it in every
Just,
episode and
yeah,
every
just,
single talk. I
we'll
can't say
Shia.
it
Just
enough.
do it, right?
Just do it. Yeah.
Just do it. Um, get the MFA on there. And then if you really want to take that next step and you have the cycles for it in your SOC or whatever, monitor those accounts for rogue logins, things like that. Ties into some of the cloud work that we're doing, right? Where we're looking at,
Hmm.
hey, this person logs every day from New York, and last Tuesday they logged in from Romania. Guess what? It's probably
Probably
not
popped.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably popped. There's your pivot point, right? We talk a lot about pivoting and clustering and actor attribution and things like that. None of that matters here. What it is what is abnormal, right? When you look at
Hmm.
the normal behavior and environment, if it looks like it's abnormal, you go look at that. And this is a way to do that, right? So you know what to look for because we have, let's say you're a company of 1,500 accounts, right? How much traffic are you seeing around that every day? If you're monitoring it, you're seeing a lot of traffic. But if you get a notification that says, hey, these 100 accounts showed up on a dark web credential dump, then you have that
Right.
targeted area to look at. So that's what I mean by threat intelligence is designed to enable to give context to things. Because, oh, I want to know all of the everybody that's attacking us, right? Well, it's the whole internet, next question. But if
Hmm.
it says which of our accounts have been exposed on the dark web and what should we do, then that's something threat intelligence can help you with because then your intelligence analyst can say, hey, these attacks or these accounts showed up in these dumps on these dates. This is our analysis of what the likelihood of them being attacked is. Let's make sure that
Right.
we get these MFA enabled, passwords changed, increased monitoring.
I
Those
do
three
feel like
things,
that's
yeah.
also a part of the investigative process. In many ways, we get to the end and we're doing our after action, and they're like asking us, them being the victim organization at the time, but would be very curious of how did patient zero get popped? And in many cases, we couldn't determine it. And I do feel like what we're kind of even doing at Blackpoint that I find interesting is leveraging these scanning tools to say, well, we triple checked, pulled some of the accounts in question or anyone involved within that attack path just to go back in time and say, like, yeah, they are kind of exposed online. So likely it was that. It feels like we went from the stages of reconnaissance, always not really leaving a footprint, and now initial access rarely leaves a footprint. You automatically have, privilege escalation, and then you see everything after that. But how that privileged account got popped, I feel like that's where we're starting to see this is where the dark web comes into play because it's almost creating no footprint outside of immediate priv and lateral traversal.
100%. So one of the things that people often get irritated with me about when they're asking me, well, how did this happen? Was because I give the textbook response of it depends. Because it does, right?
Yeah.
You were an incident responder. How many times did you write a report where you had to come back to a root cause and you were like, I don't know. And you know,
We could not find the data to support this.
correct. You can't really put I
Best
don't
just to
know.
clean it all.
Yeah,
Clean it
right.
all up.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
It's just
reset
like,
everything.
shake the magic 8 ball. It says, results unknown. Um, but
Results unknown. I need
yeah,
that magic eight
yeah,
ball.
exactly.
404 error.
404, right. But it comes back to the fact that if you are spending the time doing historical analysis on these attacks during an active attack, you're
Hmm.
misallocating your resources, right? Because you need to
Yeah.
stop the bleeding. IR is about triage. It's about stopping the bleeding, getting an environment secure, and back to business functionality, right? So you can actually make money. And then you take that time and you be like, hey, threat intelligence team, here is all of our data from the last engagement that we did.
Hmm.
Why don't you go through this and see what trends you can find out? And the threat intelligence little gremlins that they are going to be like, yes, let's do this. Blah, blah, blah. And then we'll go through there and be like, oh, hey, here's this, here's this, here's this. Are we going to find root cause? Maybe not. And sometimes it's really simple, right? Sometimes it's, oh, somebody in accounting downloaded this PDF and it was a
Yeah.
bad PDF. And then the attacker, set up a reverse shell, boom, done, game over. Sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's no logging. Sometimes you can't get an image. Sometimes there's nothing in memory, all these other things. But
Yeah.
when you
DFIR's not perfect.
understand, right, exactly. And we're just human, right? We're not computers. Um, so when you understand the context of how these attacks start, that a lot of these attacks start with, oh, these credentials got stolen and then you reused for initial access, things like that. You start to paint this picture of how these attacks work.
Hmm.
So you say, yeah, it seems pretty simple, and it is. It is. It's a very simple attack path. But once you start ratcheting up the complexity, like if you're going against a hardened target or something like that, that's the stuff that always hits the news. So people are just like, ooh, security's so hard. How do you do it? Well, I'll tell you what, 90% of my job is I Google stuff, right? I look on search
Yeah.
engines for who did
The
what, right?
secret's been told.
Right. There's somebody else has had this problem. Now, it often is annoying whenever I look for a problem. I go to a forum and it's a post I made where I just said, hey, I fixed it. I'm just like,
Right.
past me. Like, what did you do? How did you fix this? I have forgotten. I'm old. But yeah, so yes, security is hard, but the more that you understand about attack paths and the nature of these attacks, the more it
It's
becomes
less
less difficult.
complex. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so we talked about like the basics of the dark web. Not that scary, not that complicated. How it's affected blue teams, threat intelligence efforts, how threat
Hmm.
intelligence can help you. What if we met again and did this? Like what are the other layers of the dark web that people don't quite understand that we haven't touched on?
What haven't we touched on? Well, there's some stuff that we haven't touched on that we can't talk about in a polite podcast, right? So we're
What's
not
a
going to talk
polite
about those.
podcast?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. It's not this one. But
Probably not. I'm gonna have to
but
say. I'm
no,
gonna
I
have to
mean,
tell Patrick to blurp out every time I say.
Corn hub.
I don't even think I'm supposed to say that on
bow,
this.
chicka, bow, bow.
Corn hub. Corn.
Let's just go down the list
This is
of
not
words.
a polite podcast. Yeah.
The list of words that'll get us banned from the Apple App Store, right, or podcast store, or whatever. I don't know. I'm old. I'm a Luddite. I don't use these things. But let's see. What could we talk about on the dark web? I mean, realistically, I think diving into, when you're trying to build out a response program or a TI program, how much attention do you pay to the dark web, right? Like, is it worth
Yeah.
your resources? Because stuff like this mother of all,
Proactively, but
right?
yes.
Stuff like this mother of all breaches is a headline maker, right? You're going to get questions from your leadership. Like, hey, what do we need to know about this? Is this a thing? Are we in this?
But
The
there's
answer
so limited
to that question,
information. It's
right?
not that complicated. It's just like, yep, here's all the data. A lot of it's overlapping.
There's the key, though. There's the
It's
key.
our
You
giant
just unlocked
scrapbook of breaches.
You just unlocked it. It's not complex to us, but for
Okay.
people that are not in our world,
How would you translate?
It is complex.
And how would you translate? And maybe this is a great way to wrap up too for the viewers, is like, how do you translate this from server room to boardroom of Moab? Because they want to know. They're like, I read this article. Microsoft's
Don't
executives
panic.
just got popped.
Yeah.
Because CrowdStrike wanted to talk about it.
Don't panic is the
I'm
first
not
thing,
gonna
right?
Yeah. Don't panic.
No, 100%. Because like, remember what's one of the things that you did as an incident response consultant, that I did as incident response consultant? It's incident management, right?
Yeah.
It's, hey, everybody else is running around with their heads cut off. Like, holy F, we are screwed. What are we going to do? And then you walk in slinging the big guns and you're just like, hey, I got this. Chill. And then, so if you come in and be like, don't panic, use the people that you have hired to be like, ask pointed questions. What do we need to know? Like, are we in this data set? The answer to that is yes. 100%. If there's 26 billion records in there, you're in it. Yeah. Probably, right? It's more records than there are people on Earth. You're in the dump, right? If you have a presence online, you're in there. You're in the dump. So it's don't panic. Understand what you need to understand to make sure that your bases are covered, that your crown jewels are protected, that you're doing basic security hygiene, right? So maybe this is the impetus that you need. Be like, hey, boss man, there's this mother of all breaches. We're in there. Can we roll out MFA, right? Mm-hmm. Leverage. So leverage news stories like this to help you build your security program, to get those basics in place, because I guarantee you, if you do the basics well, you're in a better position than 75% of the orgs out there. If you do MFA, good passwords, use a password manager, use a physical security key like a YubiKey, something like that. That will help you. So what can we talk about? We can talk about how much do you need to worry about the dark web? And I have opinions on that, but maybe for another time. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe more of a happy hour situation, because I love the good, strong opinions around this. And this has been fantastic too, because I feel like we see a lot of buzzword marketing stuff out there around dark web technologies and scanning and having threat intelligence built in, and people don't even know where to turn from a security procurement side of the house. And I do feel like just understanding that, hey, this isn't new. This is definitely a part of our economy, to be honest. Mm-hmm. The world's greatest economy. And also stay calm. It's not a big deal. A lot of this data is probably stale. A lot of it's not stale, but at the end of the day, the remediation recommendations are straightforward.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're all exposed. We're all already out there showing ourselves completely naked, but
we're all naked and afraid.
We're all
but
naked
here's your clothes.
And here's your clothes. All you have to do is put on a pair of pants.
Exactly.
MFA
exactly.
Yeah. And other reset methodologies. But I love that. So thank you so much, Nick.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
I think we're gonna have to dig into this a little bit more. I think we're
100%.
We might have to bring in some friends. We might. I
think we've got some friends
earlier.
Yeah.
We definitely have some friends.
Yeah, we have some friends.
The threat intelligence side of the house. Let's get into that. more.
Yeah,
I want
absolutely.
to see a
I
little
have
bit more
I
of that.
have opinions out the wazoo.
And so if anyone, shameless plug, we did just drop a blog that Nick, of course, authored around Moab to get more understand a little bit of the links. Obviously hit him up. And then you're doing a webinar, right? I
I
think you have a
am.
webinar
Yes.
too.
February 8th, we're doing a webinar on the dark web. You're going to see a lot of recurring themes both in the blog and in
Right.
the webinar. I would encourage you to attend them and read them, if not for just my glowing personality, which everybody loves, So,
I do.
uh,
Yeah.
well, I appreciate that. I'm glad that I was able to come onto the show and be given a platform to to give my opinions. It's always a
Yeah.
pleasure.
If all
So.
else fails, you can just sell access on the dark web then at this point.
Hey,
You're like, you know
if
what?
I
This isn't
didn't
working
have any
out.
morals, maybe I could have a wrapped Lamborghini too, right?
Ugh, yeah, gosh. It's hard choosing the good side, to be quite honest. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Return of the Mac, and we will catch everyone on the next episode. Thank you.